Have you ever wondered how an enduring conflict like the Israel-Palestine strife began? Let's rewind the clock to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This was a time of global upheaval and shifting identities, a time when the seeds of the Israel-Palestine conflict were sown. It was during this period that we witnessed the rise of two powerful ideologies, Zionism and Arab nationalism. Zionism emerged from the long history of Jewish persecution in Europe, with Jewish intellectuals and activists advocating for a national homeland for the Jewish people. They set their sights on Palestine, a land steeped in Jewish history and faith, but already inhabited by a majority Arab population. Parallel to this, Arab nationalism was on the rise. The Arabs, who had lived under Ottoman rule for centuries, were yearning for self-determination, for a chance to govern their own lands, including Palestine. They saw the influx of Jewish immigrants as a threat to their aspirations. Now let's talk about the Balfour Declaration of 1917. This was a public statement issued by the British government during World War I, expressing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It was a statement that would have profound implications for the future of the region. The declaration was seen by the Zionists as a green light for their plans. But for the Arab population, it was perceived as a betrayal. Tensions escalated, leading to sporadic violence and deepening mistrust between the two communities. The stage was set, the actors in place. The conflict was not born out of a vacuum, but from the convergence of these historical, ideological, and political forces. The Palestine that was once a shared homeland was now the object of competing national aspirations. At the heart of the conflict were two burgeoning national movements, destined to clash. As the British took control after World War I, tensions began to rise. The British Mandate in Palestine, established by the League of Nations in 1922, had a profound impact on the region. It was not just a simple administrative change, it was a shift that would fuel a conflict lasting well into the next century. Under this mandate, Britain was tasked with establishing a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This was a promise made in the Balfour Declaration of 1917, a document that would come to symbolize hope for Jews and betrayal for Arabs. At the same time, Jews were escaping the clutches of anti-Semitism in Europe. Thousands sought refuge in Palestine, bringing with them their hopes, dreams, and the determination to create a safe haven. This mass immigration, however, was not welcomed by the Arab population. They saw the influx of Jews as a threat to their homeland, their culture, and their way of life. As Jewish immigration increased, so too did the tensions. Jews bought land, established settlements, and began to form a society within a society. The Arab population, feeling sidelined and threatened, reacted with hostility. Clashes broke out and the British, caught in the middle, struggled to maintain control. Attempts were made to limit Jewish immigration, but these were met with fierce resistance. The Jewish population felt betrayed by the very power that had promised them a national home. The Arab population, on the other hand, felt their land was being stolen right under their noses. As the years passed, the situation only worsened. The Arab population called for independence and an end to Jewish immigration. The Jews, on the other hand, were determined to establish a Jewish state in Palestine, a goal that seemed within reach as their numbers continued to grow. In the end, the British, unable to reconcile the conflicting demands and growing violence, decided to hand over the problem to the United Nations in 1947. The stage was set for a conflict that would reverberate across the globe. Post-World War II, the UN stepped in, but their solution was a double-edged sword. In the aftermath of the war, the question of a homeland for the Jewish people came to the fore. The UN, in an attempt to resolve the issue, proposed a partition plan in 1947. This plan aimed to divide the British Mandate of Palestine into two separate states, one Jewish and one Arab. The proposed Jewish state covered 56% of the land, including the fertile coastal plain and the Negev desert. The Arab state consisted of the remaining 44%, largely made up of mountains and the Jordan Valley. Jerusalem, with its religious significance, was to be an international city under UN administration. The plan was met with mixed reactions. Jewish leaders, despite some reservations, accepted the plan, viewing it as a stepping stone towards realizing their long-cherished dream of a Jewish homeland. Arab leaders, on the other hand, rejected the plan outright. They felt it unfair and unjust, arguing that it disproportionately favored the Jewish population. In May 1948, the State of Israel was proclaimed, marking the end of the British Mandate. Almost immediately, neighboring Arab states launched a military intervention. This marked the beginning of the War of Independence for Israel, or the Nakba, the catastrophe, as it was known in the Arab world. The war raged on for months, with both sides experiencing victories and losses. By the time an armistice was signed in 1949, Israel had not only survived the onslaught, but had also managed to extend its territory beyond the boundaries set by the UN Partition plan. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs were displaced during the war, leading to a refugee crisis that still resonates today. The year 1948 marked the birth of a new nation, and the beginning of an enduring conflict. The UN Partition and the War of Independence set the stage for a complex and deeply rooted conflict that continues to shape the geopolitics of the region. And as we move forward in our journey, we'll delve deeper into the subsequent wars and peace efforts that have marked the Israel-Palestine conflict. Scene script. Fast forward to 1967, a war that lasted only 6 days changed the map dramatically. This was the Six-Day War, a conflict that began on June 5th and ended on June 10th. It was a rapid-fire campaign, where Israel, responding to an existential threat, launched preemptive strikes against Egypt. The war quickly escalated, drawing in Jordan and Syria. The outcomes of this war were significant and enduring. Firstly, let's talk about the causes. The immediate trigger was the buildup of Arab military forces along Israel's borders, and Egypt's closure of the Straits of Tiran, a crucial waterway for Israel. But beneath the surface, there was a deeper issue. The Arab nations, still smarting from their loss in the War of Independence, were eager for a rematch. The rhetoric was heating up, and war seemed inevitable. In the course of those 6 days, Israel managed to capture the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. This was a stunning military victory, but it also set the stage for the next phase of the conflict. With these territorial gains, Israel found itself in control of areas densely populated by Palestinians. This was the start of an occupation that would prove to be both controversial and enduring. The West Bank and Gaza Strip in particular became focal points of the conflict. The aftermath of the Six-Day War had profound implications. It reshaped the geopolitics of the Middle East, and it altered the dynamics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israel had gained significant strategic depth, but it also had to grapple with the complexities of governing a hostile population. The international community was divided. Some saw Israel as a plucky underdog defending its existence, while others viewed it as an aggressive occupier. This war added new layers of complexity to an already complicated conflict. The Six-Day War left Israel in control of territories home to hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. This was a turning point, a moment that would cast a long shadow over the decades to come. With decades of conflict boiling over, the late 20th century saw uprisings and attempts at peace. The Palestinian frustration against Israeli occupation culminated in what became known as the First Intifada, or uprising, in the late 80s. This was a largely civilian-led resistance marked by strikes, boycotts, and widespread protests. It was met with significant military force from Israel, leading to a cycle of violence that lasted for over half a decade. In the midst of this chaos, steps towards peace were made. The Oslo Accords, signed in the early 90s, were a significant milestone. These agreements, negotiated secretly in Norway, established a framework for future negotiations. They aimed to end the conflict through a gradual process culminating in a two-state solution. The accords allowed for the creation of the Palestinian Authority, giving Palestinians limited self-governance in parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. However, the optimism was short-lived. Yitzhak Rabin, the Israeli prime minister who signed the Oslo Accords, was assassinated by an Israeli extremist in 1995. His death was a major setback for the peace process, leading to increased skepticism and fear on both sides. The end of the 90s saw the eruption of the Second Intifada. This uprising was far more violent than the first, with a significant increase in suicide bombings and military operations. It led to a severe breakdown in trust and communication between Israelis and Palestinians, effectively ending the peace process initiated by the Oslo Accords. These uprisings and peace efforts highlight the complexities of the Israel-Palestine conflict. They reflect the deep-seated tensions and the desperate yearning for peace that exists side by side. Despite attempts at peace, the road to resolution remained fraught with violence. As we enter the 21st century, the Israel-Palestine conflict continues to evolve. Over recent decades, the conflict has seen a number of significant events and developments. One of these is the series of Gaza wars that have taken place. Beginning in the mid-2000s, these conflicts have been characterized by a cycle of escalation and ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian factions, particularly Hamas. They have resulted in a high cost of human lives and have further deepened the divide between the two sides. Parallel to these military confrontations, the issue of Israeli settlements in the West Bank has been a major point of contention. These settlements, considered illegal under international law, have grown significantly in the past 2 decades. They have not only created tension between Israelis and Palestinians, but also have been a stumbling block in peace negotiations. Then, there is the status of Jerusalem. This city, sacred to Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike, has been a focal point of the conflict. In recent years, the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital by some countries, notably the United States, has added another layer to the dispute. This move was met with widespread protest and condemnation from Palestinians and the international community, further complicating the path to peace. In the midst of these developments, peace efforts have continued, albeit with limited success. From high-level diplomatic negotiations to grassroots initiatives, various attempts have been made to bridge the gap between Israelis and Palestinians. However, the deep-seated mistrust and the complex nature of the issues at stake have often made progress elusive. As we stand here in the second decade of the 21st century, the Israel-Palestine conflict remains as complex and deeply rooted as ever. The past 2 decades have seen moments of intense conflict and fleeting hopes for peace. But the underlying issues, the right to self-determination, security, justice, and dignity, remain unresolved. The conflict, now over a century old, remains a complex and deeply rooted issue. So, what have we learned about the Israel-Palestine conflict? We've journeyed through the labyrinth of history, tracing the roots of the conflict back to its genesis. We've seen how the British Mandate and increasing tensions sowed the seeds of discord, leading to the UN Partition and the War of Independence. We've examined the pivotal Six-Day War and its enduring aftermath, and we've explored the Intifadas and the tireless yet often futile peace efforts. Fast forward to today. The current state of affairs is a reflection of a century-long saga, a tableau of national movements, wars, and peace efforts. Yet the conflict remains unresolved. It's a testament to the complexity of national identity and coexistence. The Israel-Palestine issue is not just about land or religion, but a convoluted web of politics, history, and human rights. The Israel-Palestine conflict, a century-long saga of national movements, wars, and peace efforts, remains unresolved, a testament to the complexity of national identity and coexistence.